So, what if I told you that one of the most promising new treatments for depression wasn't cooked up in a lab, but has actually been growing in nature for thousands of years? Today, we're going to dive into psilocybin, the psychedelic compound that's right at the heart of what could be a revolution in mental health care. Okay, to really understand why this research is so incredibly important, we have to start with this number, 17 million. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, that's how many adults in the US have dealt with major depression. And we're not just talking about feeling sad. This is a relentless, often crippling condition. And here's the tough part. For a huge number of these people, the go-to treatments just don't cut it. Conventional antidepressants like SSRIs, those are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they can be absolute lifesavers for some for sure, but for about a third of patients, they just don't work. For others, the side effects like feeling emotionally numb or losing your sex drive, they're just too much. It leaves millions of people feeling stuck and desperately searching for another option. Well, that urgent need for a better way is fueling what a lot of people are calling a psychedelic renaissance. Yep. Scientists are actually looking back at these ancient, and let's be honest, often misunderstood compounds to find some modern answers for our toughest mental health problems. And right at the center of this whole renaissance is psilocybin. It's the compound found in more than 200 species of fungi. You've probably heard them called magic mushrooms. And while it might feel brand new to modern medicine, its history is anything but. For centuries, indigenous cultures have used psilocybin in all sorts of spiritual and ceremonial contexts. Now, psilocybin's journey to the clinic has been, well, it's been complicated. For decades, it's been a Schedule I substance here in the US, which puts it in the same legal box as heroin. That means it's been legally defined as having no medical use and a high potential for abuse. But now, a whole wave of serious, rigorous research is starting to challenge that idea, showing that it can actually be a safe and really powerful treatment when, and this is key, when it's used in a controlled, medically supervised setting. Okay, so if this compound has so much promise, how in the world does it actually work? Let's get into the really cool science of what's happening inside the brain. So, the latest research coming out of places like Imperial College London suggests psilocybin fundamentally changes how the brain talks to itself. It basically opens up the brain. Think of it like temporarily dissolving all the walls between different departments in an office. Suddenly, you've got these free-flowing conversations and new connections between parts of the brain that almost never communicate. And this is a really powerful way to picture that change. See, in a depressed brain, the networks often get really rigid, really siloed. It's like being stuck in a mental rut you just can't climb out of. But after psilocybin, brain scans show those same networks become way more fluid, more integrated. It's almost like the therapy hits a reset button, letting the brain finally break free from those old, stuck patterns of thinking. Professor David Nutt, who heads up the Imperial Center for Psychedelic Research, puts it perfectly. He says psilocybin makes the brain more flexible and fluid. So this isn't just about masking symptoms. It's about getting to the root of the problem and actually changing the brain activity that keeps depression going. Okay, so the science is super promising. But how do you get from brain scans in a lab to a safe, regulated, and accessible treatment that patients can actually get? That's the next big hurdle. A huge leap forward in that process is getting regulatory buy-in. And recently, a psilocybin analog called CYB003 got something called Breakthrough Therapy Designation from the FDA. Now, this is a big deal. The FDA reserves that status for drugs that show they could be a substantial improvement over what's already out there. It basically puts it on the fast track and signals that even the federal government sees some real potential here. So what might this look like in the real world? Well, we can look at Oregon, which created the very first regulatory framework in the nation for this. It's a really structured three-step model. First, you have a preparation session with a licensed facilitator. Then comes the administration session itself, which happens in a licensed, controlled service center. And finally, and this part is so important, you have an integration session to help you process and make sense of the whole experience. This clinical trial data gives us a really fascinating head-to-head comparison. So when it comes to just reducing the core symptoms of depression, both psilocybin and a common SSRI were pretty effective. But look at the other metrics. Psilocybin showed a greater improvement in overall well-being and in social functioning. And this one's a big one. While SSRIs often lower sex drive, patients on psilocybin actually reported an improvement. This hints that the benefits might be much broader than just treating symptoms. It could be about improving a person's entire quality of life. But, beyond all the data and the brain scans and the regulations, What does this actually feel like for the person going through it? The personal stories. That's where you see the truly profound potential of this therapy. For people who are carrying around deep-seated trauma, this therapy can create a safe container to revisit painful memories without being totally overwhelmed by them. One person described it as a feeling of release, like years of anger and shame and fear were just melting away, finally giving them a sense of closure. And for those with depression, which so often comes with this intense inner critic, the experience can be just transformative. Another participant talked about seeing themselves through a lens of forgiveness for the very first time, finally letting go of a self-hatred they'd been carrying for years. And wow, maybe one of the most powerful applications is in helping people face the unimaginable challenge of a terminal illness. For patients who are grappling with that end-of-life anxiety, psilocybin therapy has been shown to reduce fear and bring this incredible sense of peace and acceptance. So where do we go from here? Well, the path forward involves a lot more of those big, large-scale phase 3 trials. They're absolutely essential for any potential FDA approval. We're also seeing more states and cities look into new legislation, kind of like what Oregon did. And the research is expanding to other really tough conditions like addiction and anorexia. But it's so important to remember, the focus through all of this remains squarely on medically supervised therapeutic use. This isn't about recreational use. It's really an incredible journey, isn't it? From an ancient ritual all the way to the cutting edge of neuroscience. And yeah, there are still a lot of questions and a lot of hurdles to clear, but the evidence is building. The stories are just so powerful. And it really makes you wonder, are we on the verge of a brand new chapter for mental health? One that was, believe it or not, growing in nature all along?